Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. The United States says it's ready to re-engage in meaningful diplomacy to revive the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. White House spokesperson Jen Psaki said Washington is disappointed that Iran has ruled out talks on the deal with major powers. Earlier, Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson said it is not an appropriate time for the talks proposed by the European Union. The US Special Envoy and Afghanistan's top officials have discussed ways to accelerate the Afghan peace process. Meeting Afghan High Council for National Reconciliation Chairman Abdullah in Kabul, Zalmay Khalilzad also called for an end to violence. Khalilzad is in Afghanistan on the first leg of his regional trip to discuss the peace process on the first anniversary of the Doha deal. Israel has launched rocket attacks striking southern parts of the Syrian capital Damascus. The Syrian army said the attack, second in less than a month, came from the occupied Golan Heights. The military said its air defense system shot down most of the rockets. Protesters are marching across Myanmar in defiance of a crackdown by security forces that killed at least 18 people a day earlier. In Yangon, people paid their respects and laid flowers for deceased anti-coup protesters. The calls for a more united international response have grown after the worst violence since the military seized power a month ago. The global number of coronavirus infections has crossed 114 million, with over 2.5 million deaths. The new variant of the virus, first found in Brazil, has been detected in the United Kingdom, while the British authorities have been unable to trace so far one of the 6 persons infected. Meanwhile, Pakistan has registered over 1,300 new cases and 36 deaths overnight, as its toll nears 12,900. And in the Pakistan Super League, Islamabad United will take on Quetta Gladiators in today's only fixture at the National Stadium, Karachi. Islamabad United are 4th in the PSL points table, while Gladiators are at bottom, losing all 3 matches. Well, these were the top stories. News in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. The US says it is ready to re-engage in meaningful diplomacy to revive the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. It comes after Tehran ruled out holding informal talks with the US and European powers on the deal.
The back-and-forth jousting between US and Iran continues over Washington's probable return to the 2015 nuclear deal. Republican senators are mounting pressure on President Joe Biden to keep the US out of the JCPOA. On the latest statement by Iran, White House spokesperson Jen Psaki said Washington is disappointed that Tehran has ruled out talks in the deal with major powers. Psaki said Washington will consult with China, France, Russia, the United Kingdom and Germany on the best way forward. However, Tehran argues it is not an appropriate time for the talks proposed by the European Union. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Saeed Khatibzadeh said the US must lift all of its unilateral sanctions on Iran first. Iran's Atomic Energy Organization has also warned the UN nuclear watchdog against a possible anti-Tehran resolution. Meanwhile, the organization's chief announced 2 nuclear centrifuges at Fordow and Natanz nuclear facilities.
Now, US Special Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad and top Afghan officials have discussed ways to accelerate the peace process. Meeting Afghan High Council for National Reconciliation Chairman Abdullah in Kabul, Khalilzad called for an end to the violence. A statement from Abdullah's office said they discussed the review of the Doha deal being undertaken by the Biden administration. It said the two leaders also mulled the second round of intra-Afghan talks in Doha. Meanwhile, the U.S. State Department said Khalilzad will also meet Taliban representatives in addition to other Afghan leaders. Khalilzad is in Afghanistan on the first leg of his trip to discuss the peace process on the first anniversary of the Doha deal. Now, the Indian Dalit community has joined forces with the farmers to protest against the BJP government's new farm laws. The marginalized community's representatives say the Dalits will now fight against the farm laws until they are withdrawn. Meanwhile, the head of the government's inquiry commission has resigned after no meeting was held since its formation. Tens of thousands of farmers continue their agitation against the farm laws for the 94th straight day. Now, over 200 farmers have died during the ongoing protests, including 5 who committed suicide in the demonstrations. Meanwhile, Israel has launched rocket attacks striking southern parts of the Syrian capital, Damascus. The Syrian army said the attack, second in less than a month, came from the occupied Golan Heights. The military said its air defense system shot down most of the rockets. The latest strike is speculated to be in response to an attack on an Israeli-owned ship in the Gulf of Oman. The Iranian Foreign Ministry rejected Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's accusations. Now moving to Yemen, where 5 civilians have been killed and 3 others wounded in an explosion at a house in Al-Hawaq district. This comes as the battle for oil-rich Mari province spreads to the port city of Hudaydah. In a tweet, the UN mission strongly condemned acts of violence that breach the Hudaydah agreement. The Houthis and the Arab-led coalition have blamed each other for the attack. However, the UN called on all parties to refrain from attacking residential areas. Violence has escalated in Yemen, especially in Marib, the government's last stronghold in the north. Now, 15 migrants have drowned after their boat capsized off Libya's coastal town of Zawiya. The International Organization for Migration says the victims were on a rubber boat carrying 110 refugees. A spokesperson said 95 migrants were intercepted and returned to Libya by the Coast Guard. Safar Msehli said many of the survivors suffered burns from engine fuel and hypothermia, with some taken to the hospital. This is the second shipwreck in just over a week, with migrants taking a dangerous sea journey to reach Europe. Now, protesters are marching across Myanmar in defiance of a crackdown by security forces. This comes a day after 18 people were killed in the bloodiest violence since the military coup 1 month ago. Clashes took place in various parts of the country after police opened fire on crowds to disperse them. However, the protesters have vowed to intensify their agitation against the military rule. In Yangon, people paid their respects and laid flowers for deceased anti-coup protesters. The United States and Canada condemned the violence and called for a united response. The UN Special Rapporteur for Myanmar, Tom Andrews, proposed a global arms embargo and more sanctions on the military regime. Now, the global number of coronavirus infections has crossed 114 million, with over 2.5 million deaths. Meanwhile, the new variant of the virus first detected in Brazil has been found in the UK. But British authorities have been unable to trace one of the 6 persons infected so far. Details in this report.
The fear of new COVID-19 variants is making it hard for countries to lift restrictions and restore normalcy. But frustration and outrage against the curbs are mounting globally, with protests turning violent in some countries. In Brazil, people took to the streets to reject new restrictions as a dramatic surge prompted a lockdown in the capital, Brasilia. Canada has decided to keep its border with the U.S. closed for now until a significant number of vaccines are administered. A World Health Organization estimate shows that less than 10% of the global population has antibodies. In the U.S., Dr. Anthony Fauci has urged Americans to take the newly approved Johnson & Johnson vaccine or accept any of the 3 approved shots.
All 3 of them are really quite good, and people should take the one that's most available to them. If you go to a place and you have J&J and that's the one that's available now, I would take it. I personally would do the same thing. I think people need to get vaccinated as quickly and as expeditiously as possible. And if I would go to a place where they had J&J, I would have no hesitancy whatsoever to take it.
The Netherlands deployed anti-riot police as people gathered to protest against COVID measures in Amsterdam. The UK has recorded its lowest number of new cases in 5 months. However, authorities are concerned about increased transmissibility due to the Brazilian variant.
So this P1 variant is more transmissible than the original strains we saw from this virus. It is likely to have more antigenic change and therefore increase the risk of reinfections. And while we don't know the response to vaccine yet, we are concerned that we don't have spread of this that may impact on our vaccine program.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has also received his first dose of the homegrown vaccine. Meanwhile, researchers in Cambodia and Thailand have recently found a coronavirus in horseshoe bats that is closely related to SARS-CoV-2.
Meanwhile, Pakistan has reported 36 more deaths from COVID-19 and nearly 1,400 infections overnight. The nationwide death toll approaches 12,900, while the infections tally is over 581,000. The Health Ministry says there are more than 22,000 active cases in the country. More than 546,000 people have recovered from the disease. Meanwhile, all schools across the country have restarted regular in-person classes from today. However, the Health Ministry has directed the schools to strictly follow the SOPs against COVID-19. These include the use of masks, physical distancing and hand washing. Thousands of people have taken to the streets in Haiti to demand an end to President Jovenel Moïse's term in office. A dispute between Moïse's administration and the opposition over the duration of the presidential term sparked the demonstrations. Protesters accused Moïse of being a dictator backed by the US and the United Nations. They pledged to continue fighting in the streets to remove him from the power. Haiti's opposition claims Moïse should step down as his 5-year term in office expired last month. Moïse won a disputed 2015 election, the result of which was later cancelled by an electoral council. Moïse argues he took power after fresh elections in 2016 and has pledged to step down next year. Former US President Donald Trump has hinted at a possible presidential run in 2024. Addressing a conference in Florida, Trump vowed to help Republicans try to regain majorities. Speaking at the Conservative Political Action Conference in Orlando, Trump repeated claims he had won the 2020 election. The speech was his first major appearance since leaving the White House nearly 6 weeks ago. Trump aimed at disloyal Republicans, blaming them for trying to convict him for the Capitol riots. Trump also dismissed reports that he was launching a third party affirming his faith in the Republican Party but singling out his rivals. The White House has dismissed Trump's speech as GOP politics looking for a path forward. More news coming up in this news bulletin after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now moving on with the news stories. Russia says Twitter is maliciously violating the country's laws by not deleting content at the request of the government. Russia's communications regulator warned Twitter of a large fine if it is found guilty of failing to comply. Moscow banned material linked to suicide, pornography and drugs. Roskomnadzor said Twitter has refused more than 2,800 requests for content removal since 2017. Moscow in recent months has taken steps to exert more influence over foreign social media platforms. Twitter has been fined in the past for breaching Russia's data laws as well. Now, Italy's Mount Etna, the tallest active volcano in Europe, continued to erupt, spewing out volcanic ash around Catania. A blanket of ash and fragments of rock covered roads and buildings in the nearby town of Chiare. The ash forced residents to employ brooms and dustpans to sweep volcanic residue from the streets. The activity began on 16th of February, lighting up Etna 7 times in the past days. The 3,330-meter high volcano often erupts but rarely causes damage. The last major eruption of Mount Etna was recorded in 1992. Now, Russia has launched its space satellite Arktika-M to monitor the climate and environment in the Arctic. The launch came amid a push by the Kremlin to expand the country's activities in the region. In a tweet, the head of Russia's Roscosmos Space Agency, Dmitry Rogozin, said the satellite has reached its intended orbit. It was launched from Kazakhstan's Baikonur Cosmodrome by the Soyuz rocket. The Arktika-M will have a highly elliptical orbit that passes over northern latitudes to monitor the regions for lengthy periods. Now, the drama Nomadland has won the top movie honor at Hollywood's Golden Globes in mostly virtual bi-coastal ceremony. While British royal drama The Crown has swept the television honors. More in this report.
Some of the best content on television and cinema were honored at the 78th edition of the Golden Globes award show. Like everything else, the coronavirus pandemic also affected the awards season. The ceremony took place from both Los Angeles and New York, with nominees virtually taking part from locations around the world. Nomadland movie won top honor at the awards, while British royal drama The Crown has swept the television honors. The Crown dominated the ceremony with 4 awards, including Best Actress for Emma Corrin and Best Actor for Josh O'Connor.
I just want to say I'm very lucky to be able to work in this period, and there are so many people who are unable to work and are alone and isolated, and I hope that we can all collectively put mental health at the forefront of our mind. Thank you so much.
Netflix The Queen's Gambit was named the best television limited series. Anya Taylor-Joy's depiction of a young chess champion fighting drug and alcohol addiction was nearly flawless.
I learned so much. I'm so grateful, and thank you to the audiences that have watched it and supported the characters. It meant the world, so thank you so much. Okay, thank you.
Mockumentary Borat's subsequent movie film won the award for Best Movie Musical or Comedy at the awards. Late actor Chadwick Boseman was honored posthumously with the Best Movie Actor award at the ceremony held in Los Angeles. 1970s heartthrob actor and activist Jane Fonda received a Lifetime Achievement Award at the ceremony.
Now, European stocks have risen sharply as global markets rally on falling U.S. Treasury yields, boosted by positive news on the coronavirus vaccine front. London's FTSE is leading the gains, adding nearly 2%. Europe's stock 600 and Italy's FTSE MIB have added close to 2% as well. The CAC 40 in Paris has ascended over 1.5%, while Frankfurt's DAX has gained over 1%. Earlier, all Asian bourses traded higher. And now let's have a look at the weather updates around the world. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.